I buried my uncle on a Tuesday. January wind cut across the Nebraska plains so cold it made your teeth ache, whistling through the grain elevator vents like a low moan. The turnout was small. Clem had lived like a hermit for 40 years, and folks remembered that more than they remembered he was human. Kyle Whitmore showed up late in his black Suburban, diesel engine, idling loud enough to drown out the preacher's closing prayer. He was 44, soft hands, custom boots that had never seen mud. Owned the grain elevator, where half the town earned their living. He shook hands at graveside like he was running for office. At the church basement reception, smell of burned coffee and wet wool coats, Kyle pulled out a laminated deed and passed it around like a communion plate. Recently discovered, he announced, voice carrying. Clem wanted me to have the land. I'm building a youth camp. My wife Lorraine nodded from the piano bench. It's God's will, the room murmured approval. I opened my mouth to object, but the silence that followed was the kind that makes you swallow your words. The church secretary pressed a sealed cardboard box into my hands. Clem left this, said to give it to you when they come for the land. The farmhouse sat 40 miles northwest of town, where the sandhills started their roll toward nothing. Clem had built it himself in 1979, no insulation, no central heat, just a diesel space heater that rattled like a dying engine. I hadn't been inside in 8 years. The lock stuck, frozen, until Travis put his shoulder into the door. My son was 42, worked the grain scales at Kyle's elevator. He'd taken the afternoon off without asking permission, which meant he'd hear about it later. Smells like kerosene and 50 years of loneliness, he said. The box sat between us on Clem's kitchen table, cardboard soft with age. I worked a screwdriver under the packing tape while Travis opened windows to let the cold air chase out the stale. Inside were leather notebooks, the kind surveyors used before everything went digital, and a rusted transit, the old mechanical kind, with a brass telescope and leveling screws. I turned it over, scratched into the base. Property of C. Brennan, 1979. He kept his surveying gear, Travis said. I opened the first notebook. Clem's handwriting, tight and precise. Coordinate tables, hand-drawn plots, creek markers, property corners, every measurement dated and signed like a legal document. Travis flipped through pages, stopped. Dad, these coordinates don't match the county map. I pulled the county survey from my truck, the one I'd picked up that morning after the funeral, spread both documents on the table. Clem's survey showed the creek running 200 yards east of where Kyle's deed said it ran. Could be wrong, Travis said, but his voice said he didn't believe it. Clem worked for Union Pacific for 30 years before he came out here. He knew how to measure things. The transit sat there between us. Cold metal, solid truth. I picked it up, felt the weight of it. Men used to build railroads with tools like this, used to stake out towns, mark property lines, settle disputes. You couldn't lie to a transit. It told you where things were, not where you wanted them to be. My phone buzzed. Lorraine, dinner at 6. Please don't be late. We made it home by 5:30. Lorraine had set the table for 4, her, me, Travis, and Emma. My daughter taught 5th grade in town, always arrived exactly on time, never left her students waiting. She kissed my cheek but didn't meet my eyes. How was the farmhouse? Lorraine asked, passing the pot roast. Clem left his surveying notebooks, his old transit. That's nice. Her voice had that careful flatness she used when she'd already made up her mind about something. The property lines don't match the county records. Fork sound stopped. Emma looked at her plate. Walt? Lorraine said. Kyle showed us the deed. It's legal. I'm going to contest it. For what? So you can have 320 acres of frozen dirt? Kyle's building something good, a place for kids, for the community. For Kyle, you mean? Travis cleared his throat. Dad's right, Mom. Something's off about that deed. The date doesn't make sense with when Clem bought the land. Your father's choosing money over doing right. Lorraine stood, coffee cup in hand. The chair scraped loud against the linoleum. I'm tired. I'll sleep in the spare room tonight. She walked down the hall. The bedroom door closed soft, which was worse than slamming it. Emma pushed her chair back. Dad, I have school tomorrow. Emma, the school board already asked me about this. Kyle sits on the board. The principal said my family's lawsuit could complicate things. She pulled on her coat, wouldn't look at me. I can't lose my job over land I've never even seen. The door closed behind her. Travis and I sat in the yellow kitchen Melanie had painted 20 years ago when we'd still believed in fresh starts and morning light. I'll help you, Travis said. Whatever you need. You'll lose your job. Probably, He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Kyle already mentioned the grain contracts at the funeral, said he hoped I could talk sense into you. That's not asking. That's a threat. Outside, Emma's taillights disappeared down the driveway. Inside, I could hear Lorraine moving around in the spare room, settling in. Travis stood to leave. What are you going to do? I looked at Clem's transit sitting on the counter, that old piece of precision, waiting 40 years for someone to ask the right questions. I'm going to find out what my uncle knew. The grain elevator dominated Ashford like a cathedral, concrete and steel rising 8 stories above Main Street. Diesel trucks idled in the loading yard, hydraulic lifts groaning as they hoisted wheat into the bins. The smell hit you from 2 blocks away, grain dust, diesel exhaust, and the coffee from the vending machine that had been burning since dawn. Kyle's office sat above the floor, glass walls so he could watch his kingdom. I climbed the metal stairs at 7 in the morning when the first trucks were rolling in. He was at his desk, eyes on 3 computer monitors showing grain futures from Chicago, didn't look up when I walked in. Walt, surprised you're not busy packing up Clem's things. I want to see the original deed. You saw it at the funeral. I saw a laminated copy. I want to see the original, with the notary seal. The county recorder's stamp. Kyle swiveled his chair. Behind him, the futures board ticked green and red. It's with my lawyer, being properly filed. The county says Clem bought that land in 1979. Your deed's dated 1980. Clem sold it to my father a year later. Needed the money. You know how he lived, barely scraping by. Clem worked for Union Pacific. Had a pension. Look, Kyle stood, walked to the window overlooking the floor. I'm trying to do something good here. That land's been sitting empty for 40 years. A youth camp will serve this community. Your stubbornness is getting in the way of progress. Down below, Travis was at the grain scales checking in a load from the Henderson farm. 3 other trucks waited in line. Progress, I said. That what you're calling it? Kyle's voice rose loud enough that heads turned on the floor below. Your nephew's greed is what's stopping this town from having something beautiful. A place where kids can learn, grow, connect with God. The drivers looked up. Travis stopped mid-weighing, met my eyes through the glass. Walt, you need to think about your family. Travis works for me. Emma teaches at a school I fund through the board. Your wife plays organ at the church that'll run the camp. Kyle smiled, the kind that doesn't touch the eyes. Some things are bigger than one man's pride. I left without answering, walked down those metal stairs with every worker watching. Travis caught me at my truck. Dad, I'm filing a legal challenge, today. Kyle's going to fire me. I know. He looked back at the elevator, at the job he'd held for 16 years. Those grain contracts I co-signed for the farmers. Kyle signed them too. He just reminded me this morning that he can call them anytime he wants. Early termination clause. Says it's standard, but I never saw him use it before. How many contracts? 12 farms, maybe $3 million in grain. If he calls those loans, puts liens on their land. Travis shook his head. They'll blame me. A truck rolled past, diesel smoke hanging in the cold air. The driver, Bill Henderson, whose family had been farming since the 20s, looked straight ahead like we weren't there. I'm still filing, I said. I know. Travis pulled his truck keys from his pocket. I'll meet you at the courthouse. The county courthouse sat in Kearney, 25 miles south. Built in 1932, limestone and marble, the kind of building that wanted you to feel small. We found the clerk's office on the 2nd floor, wood polish smell mixing with old paper and somebody's coffee. The clerk was a woman about my age, reading glasses on a chain. She pulled up the property records on a computer that looked older than Travis. Brennan Land, Section 12, Range 9. Purchased by Clement Brennan, October 1979. Clear title. She clicked through screens. Recent filing, transfer deed to Kyle Whitmore, pending probate. You have 90 days to contest. After April 15th, it's his. I'm contesting it. She slid forms across the counter. You'll need to file a formal challenge, post notice, request a hearing. Judge Harrison handles probate. John Harrison, Kyle's golf partner. She looked at me over her glasses. Judge Harrison presides over all probate cases in this county. I filled out the forms while Travis stood at the window watching the courthouse lawn, where the snow was melting into brown mud. The clerk stamped each page with enough force to make the counter shake. 90 days, Mr. Brennan. After that, the land's his. Outside, Travis's truck had a pink slip under the wiper. Termination notice, effective immediately, signed by Kyle Whitmore. The paper was still warm from the printer. Travis read it once, folded it carefully, put it in his coat pocket. He works fast, was all he said. My phone buzzed. Text from Emma. Dad, the principal wants to see me after school. Please tell me you didn't file that lawsuit. I stood there in the courthouse parking lot, holding papers that might cost my son his job, my daughter her career, my wife her peace. The diesel from the street plows mixed with the smell of wet wool from my coat. Travis looked at me. Now what? Reverend Marcus Dunn lived in a house behind the Methodist church, white-clapboard with a porch that wrapped around 3 sides. I found him there that evening, rocking chair creaking, pipe smoke rising into the cold air. He was 72, retired 5 years, but still preached when the new minister needed a Sunday off. Walt, he didn't seem surprised to see me. Heard about Travis, heard about the lawsuit too. News travels. In a town this size, news doesn't travel. It arrives before you do. He gestured to the empty chair beside him. Sit. The porch boards were cold enough to feel through my boots. Dunn tamped his pipe, relit it. The smell of tobacco mixed with the diesel from the street where plows were making another pass. I used to bring Clem communion, he said. Once a month, drove out to that farmhouse. He'd make coffee so strong it could strip paint, and we'd sit at his kitchen table for an hour, maybe 2. He never mentioned it. Clem didn't mention much, but he talked to me. Dunn pulled on his pipe, exhaled slow. Used to survey at midnight. I asked him why once. He said, "So they can't see me mark the truth." Who's they? He never said exactly, but he wasn't paranoid, Walt. He was careful. There's a difference. A car passed, headlights sweeping the porch. Inside the house, a clock chimed 7. I kept a ledger, Dunn said, 40 years worth. Started when I was a young minister, thought I'd track prayers, pastoral visits, that sort of thing. But you notice patterns. Donations that come right before zoning changes, land deals that happen the week after someone dies, money moving in ways that don't quite add up. You're saying Kyle's father. I'm saying I paid attention. And I'm saying Clem wasn't the only one. Dunn stood, joints popping. Come inside, I'll show you. The ledger was leather-bound, pages yellowed, but the handwriting clear. Dunn opened it to 1980, ran his finger down entries, names, dates, amounts, some in community prayers, fellowship contributions, but some plain enough. March 15, 1980, WK to JM, $500, land transfer notation. WK, I said, Warren Whitmore, Kyle's father, JM was Jerry Matthews, county clerk, died in 2015. $500. In 1980, that bought a lot of silence. Dunn closed the ledger. I never said anything, didn't think it was my place. I kept records, told myself that was enough, that someday the truth would need witnesses. Clem knew? I think so. He never said it outright, but the last time I saw him, this was maybe 2 weeks before he died, he asked me to promise something, said when Walt comes looking, you show him everything, like he knew you would. Travis knocked on the doorframe, stamped snow off his boots. Dad, we should look at that county survey. Compare it to Clem's notebooks line by line. Dunn poured coffee, 3 cups, and we spread the documents on his kitchen table. The county map showed the creek running northwest from the property corner. Clem's hand-drawn survey showed it 200 yards to the east. If Clem's right, Travis said, then the deed Kyle has is describing the wrong land. Different property entirely. We need to prove it, I said. Physical evidence. The original survey markers. Iron pins, Travis said, reading Clem's notes. Drove them 4 feet deep at each corner. Standard practice back then. Can we dig them up? We drove out to the farmland in Travis's truck, arrived just after dark. The wind had picked up, cutting across the open ground hard enough to make our eyes water. I carried Clem's transit. Travis had a shovel. We found the spot where Clem's coordinates said the creek marker should be. Travis drove the shovel into the ground. It bounced off like he'd hit concrete. He tried again. Same result. The ground rang like iron, frozen solid. It's January, Dad. Ground's been frozen since November. Travis leaned on the shovel, breath coming out in clouds. We can't dig till spring thaw. When's that? Late March, if we're lucky. Could be April. I looked at the frozen earth, at the place where the truth was buried 4 feet down, waiting. The probate deadline was April 15th. So we wait, I said. Do we have a choice? The wind picked up, whistling across the empty land. Somewhere to the south, Kyle was probably at the country club, celebrating. To the north, Lorraine was in our spare bedroom, door closed. Emma wasn't returning my calls. And here I stood in frozen darkness, trusting a dead man's measurements and hoping spring would come in time. Travis drove me back to town. We didn't talk much. When he dropped me at the house, every light was off except the spare bedroom. I sat in the truck for a long time, engine ticking as it cooled, watching that single lit window. Travis looked at me. What if spring comes too late? Kyle's office had better heat than most houses in town. Travis told me that later, after everything fell apart. Said Kyle kept it at 75 degrees even in January, liked his comfort while the rest of them froze on the warehouse floor. Travis had gone back to clean out his desk the morning after the firing. Kyle wasn't supposed to be there, usually didn't show up before 9, but his Suburban was in the lot, diesel engine still ticking warm. Travis grabbed his personal items fast, wanted to be gone before any awkward encounters. That's when he heard voices coming through the heating vent above his old desk. Kyle's office sat directly overhead. The ductwork carried sound like a telephone. Just call the contracts, Kyle was saying. All 12 of them. Early termination standard clause. A man's voice Travis didn't recognize. That'll put liens on half the farms in the county. You sure you want that kind of attention? They co-signed with Travis. Everyone knows Travis helped his father file that frivolous lawsuit. This is Travis's fault, not mine. Kyle laughed, the sound tinny through the metal vent. Besides, I need those farms. Henderson's property borders the Brennan land. So does Kowalski's. If I can pick them up cheap when they can't cover the liens. The youth camp story? Please, that's for the church ladies in the newspaper. Once I have clear title, I've got investors from Omaha lined up. $200 million subdivision, golf course, luxury homes, the whole package. This is the last undeveloped land within 40 miles of the interstate. Papers rustling, coffee cups set down. What about the old man, Walt? He's got 90 days to prove the deed's fake. He can't. My father was careful. And Judge Harrison owes me. I funded his last campaign. Kyle's chair creaked. Walt Brennan's going to die angry and broke, just like his crazy uncle. And I'm going to be very, very rich. Travis stood there beneath that vent for 5 full minutes after they left, he told me. Just stood there with his box of desk supplies, listening to the heating system hum. He came to the farmhouse that afternoon and told me everything. We sat at Clem's table while the diesel heater rattled and the wind threw itself against the windows. $200 million, I said. He planned this. The church camp story, the donation, getting the community on his side, all of it. My phone rang. Emma. I almost didn't answer. Dad. Her voice was tight. The principal called me into his office today. The school board had an emergency meeting about you, about the lawsuit. Emma. Kyle told them your attack on his character is creating a hostile environment for the community partnership. The partnership that funds the new gymnasium, the computer lab, the after-school programs. She was crying now. The principal said I need to distance myself publicly from your legal action. He didn't say I'd be fired, but he didn't have to. I'm sorry. Are you? Because from where I'm standing, you're choosing land you've never cared about over your own daughter's career. The line went quiet except for her breathing. I can't lose my job, Dad. I won't. She hung up. Travis looked at his hands. The farmers are organizing. Bill Henderson called a meeting at the Grange Hall tomorrow night. They want me there. Want me to explain why their grain contracts are being called because of my father's greed. It's not greed. I know that. You know that. They don't. He stood, pulled on his coat. Henderson's got 3 kids in college. Kowalski just put a new roof on his barn, took out a loan to do it. If those contracts get called, they're ruined. After he left, I walked through the farmhouse. Clem's surveying maps still covered one wall. 40 years of careful notation. His bed was made military tight. His dishes were washed and stacked. A man who lived alone that long learned not to leave messes. There was nobody coming behind to clean them up. I tried calling Lorraine. No answer. Drove home at dusk, found her car in the driveway, but the house dark except for the spare bedroom light. I knocked on the door. Lorraine. Nothing. I know you're angry. I know this is tearing us apart. The door opened 6 inches. She stood there in her reading glasses, Bible in one hand. The smell of her lavender lotion drifted out, familiar and far away at the same time. You're tearing us apart, Walt. Not this. You. Her voice was steady, which made it worse. Kyle is doing something good. Building something for children, for the community, and you're standing in the way because of pride. It's not pride. The deed's fake. Kyle's father bribed the county clerk. You sound like Clem. She stepped back. Everyone thought Clem was crazy, paranoid. He died alone in that freezing house with his conspiracy theories and his midnight surveys. Is that what you want? To die alone, convinced everyone else is wrong? Lorraine, I'm ashamed of you. She closed the door. The lock turned. I stood in the hallway of my own home, listening to my wife move around in a room I couldn't enter. Through the walls, I could hear her crying, soft enough that she probably thought I couldn't hear. The house was cold. I'd forgotten to turn up the thermostat before leaving that morning. I sat at the kitchen table, that yellow table from 20 years ago, and opened Clem's survey notebook to a random page. March 3rd, 1995, midnight survey. Markers secure. They're watching the house now. Dark sedan, county plates. Don't trust anyone. The truth is in the ground where they can't reach it. I looked around that cold farmhouse, at the frost forming on the inside of the windows, at Clem's careful handwriting describing a loneliness I was only beginning to understand. Outside, the wind howled. The temperature was dropping, single digits tonight, the radio had said. The ground wouldn't thaw for 2 more months, and the clock was ticking toward April 15th. Travis came to the farmhouse 3 days later. I was heating soup on the camping stove. The kitchen at home felt too full of Lorraine's absence to sit in, when his truck pulled up the frozen drive. He looked like he hadn't slept. The farmers met last night. Henderson, Kowalski, 8 others. They voted. I'm not welcome at the co-op anymore. Henderson said his kids might not be able to finish college because of me. Because of Kyle. They don't see it that way. He sat down heavy, the chair scraping against the bare floor. Kyle's already offering to buy their land. Cash deals below market, but enough to cover the liens. They're desperate. Half of them are going to take it. I'm sorry I dragged you into this. You didn't drag me anywhere. I chose. He pulled out his phone, opened his banking app. I've got $8,000 in savings. Was going to use it for a down payment on a house, but I'm thinking we rent an excavator instead, soon as the ground thaws. Travis. I also did some research. He spread papers across Clem's table. Printed bank records, corporation filings, property transfers. Kyle's been buying land around Clem's property for 3 years, not in his own name. Shell companies, LLCs with addresses in Omaha, but I traced the signatures, it's him. I looked at the documents. 12 separate parcels, all purchased quietly, all bordering or near the Brennan land. A pattern emerging like a constellation you couldn't see until someone connected the dots. He's been planning this since before Clem died. Longer. Some of these purchases go back to 2022. Travis tapped one document. This is Henderson's North 40. Kyle bought it through an LLC 2 years ago. Henderson doesn't even know. He's still farming it under lease, paying Kyle rent on land he used to own. Kyle's going to call that lease the same time he calls the grain contract. Force Henderson to buy it back at 3 times the price, or lose everything. The soup started boiling. I turned off the camping stove, but neither of us moved to eat. These families trusted him, I said. They still do. That's what makes it work. Travis gathered the papers. I'm going to make copies, send them to the Attorney General's office. This isn't just about Clem's land anymore. This is fraud on a county-wide scale. After he left, I sat alone with the soup going cold and Clem's notebooks spread open. The February wind had picked up, rattling the loose window frames. I could smell the diesel heater mixing with the kerosene lamp I'd lit when the sun went down. This was how Clem had lived, cold, alone, surrounded by evidence nobody believed. I read through his entries, page after page of midnight observations. They moved the stakes. I marked the real ones 6 feet down with railroad spikes. Railroad iron doesn't lie. A car pulled up outside. For a moment I thought it was Lorraine, that she'd changed her mind, but the headlights were wrong. Reverend Dunn's old Buick, exhaust white, in the cold air. He came in without knocking, carrying a thermos and 2 cups. Thought you could use some coffee that doesn't taste like motor oil. We sat at the table. The coffee was good, hot enough to feel in your chest. Lorraine came to see me, Dunn said. Asked me to talk sense into you. Told her I couldn't do that if you were the one making sense. She thinks I'm crazy. She thinks you're choosing money over family. I told her that's not what I see. He poured more coffee. I see a man trying to honor his uncle's trust, trying to stop a thief from getting away with 40 years of lies. That's not crazy. That's just inconvenient for the folks who benefit from the lies. Emma won't talk to me. Travis lost his job and his savings. Lorraine moved to the spare bedroom. All this for 320 acres I never wanted. It's not about the land, though, is it? I looked at Clem's notebooks, at his careful handwriting, at the maps he'd drawn by hand because he couldn't trust the official ones. He died alone, I said. Everyone thought he was paranoid, a hermit, crazy old Clem with his midnight surveys and his conspiracy theories, but he was right about all of it, and he died without anyone believing him. So you're going to make sure someone believes him now, even if it costs me everything. Dunn stood, put his hand on my shoulder. Spring's coming, Walt. Ground always thaws eventually. You just have to be patient enough to wait for it. After he left, I found myself reading Clem's last entries written just weeks before his death. The handwriting was shakier but still precise. February 10th, 2025, surveyed markers at midnight, all secure. If you're reading this, Walt, I'm gone. They'll call you crazy too. But crazy is just what they call you when you see things others don't want to see. The truth is 6 feet down. Be patient. Wait for spring. The ground will give it up when it's ready. I traced his words with my finger. Outside, the temperature was dropping towards 0. The forecast said more snow coming, said this would be one of the coldest Februarys on record. But somewhere, under that frozen ground, buried deeper than frost could reach, iron markers were waiting. Railroad spikes that couldn't lie, couldn't be moved, couldn't be erased by forged deeds or bribes or 40 years of silence. I just had to wait for spring. The question was whether spring would come before April 15th, before the deadline, before Kyle's lies became permanent truth. I looked at the calendar on the wall. February 6th, 68 days left. Outside, the wind screamed across the plains like it would never stop. The church announcement went up on Sunday. Kyle had donated $50,000 for the new youth camp, and there would be a special recognition service. I heard about it from Travis, who heard it from his ex-coworker at the elevator, who'd heard it at the coffee shop where everyone in town seemed to hear everything. I went anyway, sat in the back pew while Lorraine played the opening hymn, her back straight, fingers moving over the keys with the precision of 40 years' practice. She didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge I was there. Kyle sat in the front row, crisp white shirt, tie that probably cost more than my truck payment. When the minister called him forward for recognition, the congregation stood and applauded. The sound echoed off the old wooden rafters, filled the space like it might never stop. Kyle Whitmore has shown us what Christian generosity looks like, the minister said. In a world of greed and selfishness, he's chosen to invest in our children, in our community's future. Kyle shook hands, humble smile, said all the right words about service and stewardship and doing God's work. Behind him, Lorraine played soft background music, something gentle and affirming. I left before the service ended, stood in the parking lot, diesel fumes from idling trucks mixing with the February cold. Emma's car was there. She'd been inside somewhere, avoiding me. 3 farmers I'd known for 30 years had walked past my pew without speaking. That evening, the farmers held another meeting at the Grange Hall. Travis wasn't invited, but Bill Henderson's youngest son, who still liked Travis despite everything, texted him the details. A vote on whether to accept Kyle's buyout offers, whether to cut their losses before the grain contracts buried them. Travis and I sat in his truck across the street, engine running for heat, watching men file into the hall through the cold. Henderson, Kowalski, Paulson, Miller, families that had been farming this land for 3-4 generations. They're going to vote yes, Travis said. They don't have a choice. Kyle gave them no choice. There's a difference. My phone buzzed, not a number I recognized. I answered anyway. Mr. Brennan, this is Sarah Chen from the Attorney General's office. I received your son's complaint and supporting documentation regarding Kyle Whitmore's land acquisitions. I put her on speaker so Travis could hear. We're opening an investigation, she continued. The shell company transactions show a pattern of fraudulent concealment. The grain contract manipulation appears to be economic coercion. If your physical evidence is as solid as these financial records, we'll have enough to prosecute. How long? I asked. These cases take time, 6 months, maybe more. The probate deadline is April 15th, 10 weeks. I understand, but we need to build a case that'll hold up in court. We can't rush that. Papers shuffling on her end. However, I did call Judge Harrison's office this morning, informed them of our investigation. The judge has voluntarily recused himself from your probate case due to potential conflict of interest. A new judge will be assigned within 48 hours. Travis looked at me, first hope I'd seen in his eyes in weeks. Can you access the land for survey purposes? Chen asked. There's a restraining order. I'll have that lifted by tomorrow. You'll have full access to conduct your investigation. She paused. Mr. Brennan, I'll be honest, the financial crimes are clear, but the deed forgery from 1980, that's harder. The clerk who notarized it is dead. Your uncle's survey work is old. If you can find physical evidence that contradicts the recorded deed, that's your strongest proof. The ground's frozen. Then I suggest you pray for an early spring. And Mr. Brennan, be careful. Kyle Whitmore has a lot to lose. People in that position do desperate things. She hung up. Travis and I sat in the warm truck watching farmers stream out of the Grange Hall. Their faces said everything. They'd voted to sell. The AG is investigating, Travis said. That's something. It's everything. Kyle's entire empire is about to collapse, and he doesn't even know it yet. Reverend Dunn called an hour later, asked me to come to his house, said it was urgent. I found him on the porch, despite the cold, ledger open on his lap. I've been thinking about that $500 notation, he said. The bribe. I kept records, but they're coded. I'm a minister, not a detective. But there's something else. He flipped pages. Kyle's father made regular payments to Jerry Matthews for 20 years, monthly, called them consulting fees. But Matthews was a county clerk making $30,000 a year. Why would he need a consultant? Hush money, I said. That's my guess. But here's what's interesting. Dunn tapped an entry from 2003. The payment stopped when Matthews' daughter needed surgery. The next month, Kyle's father paid the hospital directly, $50,000. He owned Matthews completely. And Matthews kept the original forged deed, had to, for the forgery to work. When Matthews died in 2015, his effects were boxed up and stored. County keeps records of deceased clerks' materials for 20 years in case of audit. Dunn smiled. I called the county administrator, asked about Matthews' boxes. They're in storage. Can we access them? The AG can. With a warrant. He closed the ledger. Walt, Kyle kept the forged deed as proof of his father's cleverness. Matthews kept it as insurance, and now it's going to destroy them both. The wind had died down. The night was clear, stars sharp enough to cut. Somewhere south of town, frozen ground was waiting. Somewhere in a county storage facility, a dead man's papers held the final piece of truth. How long until the ground thaws? Dunn asked. 4 weeks, maybe 5. And how long until the AG gets that warrant? She didn't say. Dunn stood, joints popping in the cold. Then I'd say we're in a race. Spring versus justice. Let's hope they arrive at the same time. The farmhouse was colder than usual. I let the diesel heater run low on fuel, hadn't bothered to refill it. Didn't seem to matter much. Cold was cold. Whether it came from outside or from the hollow place in your chest where your family used to be. I sat at Clem's table, reading his final notebook entries by the light of a kerosene lamp. The smell of burning fuel mixed with the lingering scent of old coffee grounds. Dust. 40 years of loneliness soaked into the walls. March 8th, 2018. They drove by 3 times today. Same dark sedan. County plates. They think I don't notice. I notice everything. That's the problem with paying attention. You see what everyone else pretends isn't there. April 2nd, 2020. Minister brought communion today. Good man. Keeps his own records. Told him to show Walt when the time comes. Walt will understand. He has his mother's patience and his father's stubbornness. He'll need both. January 15th, 2025. Pneumonia. Getting worse. Doctor says I should go to the hospital. I told him hospitals are where old men go to die around strangers. I'd rather die here, where I know every nail I drove, every board I cut. I buried the truth deep enough that Frost can't reach it. Walt will find it. He'll have to lose everything first. That's how truth works. You can't see it clearly until everything else is stripped away. They'll call you crazy too, Walt, but crazy is just what they call you when you see what others don't want to see. If you're reading this, I'm gone. Don't let it be for nothing. I closed the notebook. My hands were shaking, whether from cold or something else I couldn't say. Outside, sleet tapped against the windows like fingers asking to be let in. My phone sat on the table, screen dark. No calls from Lorraine in 3 weeks. Emma had blocked my number. Travis checked in daily, but even his voice had started to sound strained, like he was losing faith. The farmers had sold, all 12 of them. Kyle had closed the deals within 48 hours of their vote, cash offers they couldn't refuse because refusing meant bankruptcy. Henderson's land, Kowalski's, the Paulson place where 4 generations had worked the same soil. All of it now belonged to Kyle's shell companies, pieces of a $200 million puzzle he'd been assembling for years, and I was the only one standing in his way. One 68-year-old man with a dead uncle's notebooks and a rusted surveying transit waiting for ground to thaw while everyone I loved pulled further away. I thought about what Chen from the AG's office had said, 6 months to build a case. But I had 10 weeks until April 15th. After that, probate would close, Kyle would have clear title, and the truth would stay buried under 800 acres of luxury subdivision. Maybe Lorraine was right. Maybe I was choosing pride over family. Maybe the land wasn't worth this, worth Travis's savings, Emma's job security, the hollow place in my bed where my wife used to sleep. I could call Chen tomorrow, tell her to drop the investigation. I could sign the quitclaim deed Kyle's lawyer had offered, walk away with nothing, let it all go. Travis would eventually find work somewhere else. Emma would keep her teaching position. Lorraine would come back to our bedroom, and we could pretend this had never happened. The yellow kitchen would still smell like morning coffee. The house would be warm. I wouldn't have to sleep in a farmhouse where the frost formed on the inside of the windows, and the only sound was wind and my own breathing. Clem had died alone here. Everyone in town had thought he was crazy, paranoid, a hermit who'd wasted his life chasing conspiracy theories. At his funeral, 12 people had shown up, and half of them had come for the free coffee afterward. Was that my future? Dying alone, surrounded by evidence nobody believed, while Kyle Whitmore played golf and deposited checks and told everyone how he'd tried to help that poor, delusional Walt Brennan? I stood up, paced the small kitchen. The floorboards creaked under my weight, same boards Clem had walked for 40 years. The walls were covered with his survey maps, his careful notations, his obsessive documentation of a truth he'd known no one would believe until he could prove it. He'd waited 40 years, lived poor so they'd think the land worthless, surveyed at midnight so they couldn't see him mark the truth, died here alone, trusting that someday someone would care enough to dig deep enough to find what he'd buried, that someone was supposed to be me. But the cost kept rising. Every day the ground stayed frozen. I lost a little more. A wife's trust, a daughter's respect, a son's future. The community I'd lived in for 68 years now whispered when I walked into the hardware store, the church where I'd been married, where my children were baptized, where Lorraine's fingers had moved over the organ keys for 4 decades. I couldn't go there anymore without feeling every eye on my back. Was truth worth this? Was justice? Headlights swept across the windows. A car door slammed. I wasn't expecting anyone. Travis was in town. Dunn was at a church council meeting. I looked out through the frost-rimmed glass. Lorraine's Honda, diesel engine ticking as it cooled. She sat there for a long moment, hands on the steering wheel like she was deciding whether to stay or go. Then she got out, climbed the porch steps, knocked on the door. I opened it. She stood there in her winter coat, breath clouding in the cold, holding a grocery bag. "The spare bedroom is freezing," she said. "Thought you might be too." She walked past me, set the bag on the table. Bread, eggs, real coffee, a thermos of soup still warm. Started unpacking without looking at me. "Lorraine, don't." She kept her back turned, her voice careful and controlled. "I'm not here to argue. I'm not here to forgive you or to say you're right. I'm here because you're my husband and you're living in a freezing house eating cold soup and I took vows. You think I'm wrong. I think you're stubborn. I think you're risking everything we built for land you never wanted." She turned then, and her eyes were red from crying. "I think you're choosing Clem's ghost over your living family." Clem was right. Maybe he was, but he died alone, Walt. Is that what you want, to be right and alone? She pulled out a kitchen chair, sat down like the weight of standing was too much. "Kyle's doing good in this community. The youth camp is a lie. There is no youth camp. Kyle's building a subdivision, $200 million. I have the documents. The AG has them too." She looked at me like I'd grown a second head. Travis traced the shell companies. Kyle's been buying up land for years. The church donation, the youth camp story, it's all theater. He's playing you, Lorraine, playing all of us. The AG is investigating. They opened a case last week. Kyle doesn't know yet, but his entire empire is about to collapse. I sat down across from her. But I need the physical evidence. I need to excavate Clem's survey markers, and I can't do that until the ground thaws. Lorraine was quiet for a long time. Outside, sleet kept falling, tapping against the windows like it was trying to get our attention. "I've been attending every church finance meeting," she finally said. "Kyle promised $50,000 for the camp, but the money hasn't come through. The treasurer asked about it last week. Kyle said it's tied up in escrow, waiting for the land transfer to finalize. He never intended to donate it." I started to wonder. She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a folded paper. I photocopied the church financial projections. Kyle's donation is listed, but there's a note at the bottom, in the treasurer's handwriting, "Contingent on subdivision approval." She slid the paper across the table. I read it twice. You've been investigating him? I was trying to prove you wrong. Her voice broke. I wanted you to be wrong, Walt. I wanted Kyle to be the good man he pretended to be. I wanted you to be the stubborn fool choosing money over family, because that would be easier than this. Then what? Then realizing my husband was right. Then realizing I chose the wrong side. Then knowing I moved to the spare bedroom and stopped speaking to you while you were fighting for something that actually mattered. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I'm so sorry. I reached across the table. She took my hand, and it was the first time we'd touched in 3 weeks. I can't come home yet, she said. Emma's watching. The church is watching. If I support you now publicly, Kyle will know I'm suspicious. He'll hide the evidence better. What are you saying? I'm saying I'll stay in the spare bedroom. I'll play the organ on Sundays. I'll let everyone think I'm ashamed of you. She squeezed my hand. But I'll keep going to those finance meetings. I'll keep watching Kyle's numbers. And when you find what Clem buried, when the truth comes up, I'll be ready to testify. Lorraine, just promise me something. Her eyes were fierce now, not broken. Promise me you'll wait for spring. Don't do anything stupid. Don't confront Kyle. Don't give him any reason to suspect you're close. I promise. She stood, zipped her coat, left the groceries on the table. At the door, she paused. There's a note in the grocery bag, under the bread. After she left, I found it. Her handwriting on the back of a church bulletin. I love you. I believe you. Wait for spring. I sat at Clem's table with the kerosene lamp burning down and the sleet tapping its patient rhythm and Lorraine's note in my hands. Outside, the ground was still frozen, but somewhere deep in the earth, iron markers were waiting. And somewhere in my wife's careful investigation, in Travis's bank records, in Reverend Dunn's 40-year ledger, the truth was assembling itself piece by piece, like spring coming slowly, like patience rewarded, like faith vindicated after the long, dark season of doubt. The cost was still high. My daughter still wasn't speaking to me. The town still thought I was crazy. The ground was still frozen solid, but I wasn't alone anymore. And that made all the difference. The first warm rain came on March 23rd. Not a downpour, just a steady drizzle that fell for 3 days straight, turning snow to slush and slush to mud. The temperature climbed into the 40s, then the 50s. The ground began to give. Travis drove out to the farmland on the 26th with a test stake. Drove it 3 feet into the earth before it hit resistance. He called me from the field, voice tight with excitement. Ground's soft enough, Dad. We can dig tomorrow. I'd rented an excavator from Kearney, small enough to maneuver, but powerful enough to dig 6 feet down. Cost $400 for the day. Travis picked it up at dawn, drove it out on a flatbed. By 8 in the morning, we had it positioned at the first coordinate from Clem's notebook. Reverend Dunn arrived at 8:30 with thermoses of coffee and a prayer. Let the truth rise with the spring, he said, and we stood there in the mud with our heads bowed while meadowlarks sang their first songs of the season. The excavator's diesel engine coughed to life, loud enough to scatter the birds. Travis worked the controls, the bucket biting into soft earth. The smell of wet soil and hydraulic fluid and diesel exhaust filled the air. 3 feet down, the bucket hit something that rang like a bell. Travis shut off the engine. We climbed into the hole, scraped away mud with our hands. Iron. A railroad spike 8 inches long, driven straight down, exactly where Clem's survey said it would be. I pulled it out of the earth. It was heavy, cold, real. The kind of spike Union Pacific used to build the Transcontinental Railroad. The kind that didn't lie, didn't move, or didn't care about forged deeds or bribes, or 40 years of cover-up. One down, Travis said. 3 more corners to go. We found the second spike an hour later, the third by noon, each one exactly where Clem's hand-drawn coordinates said it would be. Each one 200 yards east of where Kyle's deed said the property line ran. At the 4th corner, the excavator hit something else. Not iron, metal, but different. Travis scraped away the mud and exposed a steel box, waterproof, welded shut, the kind of time capsule you'd bury if you wanted something to last 100 years. We hauled it up, covered in mud, heavy enough to need both of us. Dunn had brought bolt cutters. It took 20 minutes to cut through the welds. Inside, documents in plastic sleeves, a leather-bound ledger, bank statements going back 40 years, and on top, a handwritten note in Clem's careful script, Walt. If you're reading this, I'm gone. They thought I was crazy, I was just patient. Everything you need is here. The original 1979 deed, notarized and recorded, the lease agreements for the mineral rights, natural gas, $80 million current value, The bank statements showing I lived poor so they'd think the land worthless. Use it right. Make them pay for what they took. Make sure I didn't die alone with the truth. Clem. My hands were shaking as I opened the deed. Clement Brennan, purchaser, October 15th, 1979, county seal, notary stamp, everything legal and clear. The property boundaries matched his survey exactly, matched the iron spikes we'd just excavated. This was the proof. This was everything. A truck engine rumbled in the distance. I looked up to see vehicles approaching across the field. Not just one, 4, 5, 6. Farmers' trucks. Bill Henderson in the lead. They parked in a line and climbed out, boots sinking in the spring mud. Henderson walked over, looked at the excavation, the spikes, the time capsule spread open on the ground. Travis called me, he said. Told me what you found. Bill, I'm sorry about the grain contracts. Kyle called them. All 12. Just like Travis said he would. Henderson's jaw was tight. But here's the thing. The AG's office called me this morning, asked me questions about Kyle's buyout offer, about the shell companies, about whether I knew I'd been paying rent on land I used to own. The other farmers gathered around. Kowalski, Paulson, Miller. Men I'd known my whole life, who'd stopped speaking to me 6 weeks ago. We voted to accept Kyle's offers, Henderson continued. But the AG put a hold on all the transactions. Pending investigation, said Kyle's entire operation is fraudulent. He looked at the iron spikes. Travis told us what you've been doing out here, what your uncle did. We came to watch you prove it. And to apologize, Kowalski added. We should have listened. More vehicles arrived. Word had spread somehow, probably Dunn, who'd been making calls all morning. Emma's car pulled up, and my daughter climbed out, looking uncertain, like she wasn't sure she was welcome. I walked over, and she started crying before I could say anything. Dad, I'm so sorry. The principal told me this morning that Kyle threatened to pull funding if the school didn't force me to resign. That's when I knew. It's okay. It's not okay. I should have believed you. She hugged me, and I held my daughter in the spring mud while the sun broke through clouds, and everything smelled like wet earth and diesel and new beginnings. A news van crested the hill, then another. Dunn had called them too, apparently. Cameras and reporters climbing out, setting up equipment. Travis was on his phone. He looked up, face pale. AG's office just raided Kyle's building. They have a warrant for his office safe. They're seizing records. The new judge, Judge Patricia Morrison, assigned after Harrison recused himself, arrived at 2 in the afternoon. She'd ordered a public demonstration, wanted to see the evidence firsthand. We showed her Clem's time capsule, the original deed, the iron spikes. She examined each one, silent and methodical. Mr. Brennan, she said finally, I'd like you to recreate your uncle's survey, right here, right now. Show me how these measurements prove your case. I set up Clem's transit on the muddy ground. The same instrument he'd used 45 years ago, rusted but still true, leveled it, sighted through the brass telescope, called out measurements while Travis marked them with stakes. Every measurement matched the time capsule deed exactly. Every measurement contradicted Kyle's 1980 document by 200 yards. The news cameras caught all of it. Judge Morrison took notes. The farmers watched in silence. When I finished, the judge signed an order on the hood of her truck. Land and mineral rights revert to the Brennan estate, effective immediately. The 1980 deed is void. Fraudulent on its face. Mr. Whitmore's claim is denied. That's when the AG's vehicles arrived, coming fast across the field. Sarah Chen climbed out with 2 agents in a cardboard box. We found it, she said, in Kyle's office safe, the original forged deed, different notary stamp than what's on file. He kept both versions. The forensics are clear, the signature's fake. Jerry Matthews' daughter confirmed her father was paid to notarize documents he never actually witnessed. Where's Kyle? I asked. In custody. We arrested him an hour ago at the country club. Chen smiled. He was having lunch. Didn't even see us coming. The sun was setting by the time everyone left. Just me and Travis in the excavator, and 4 iron spikes marking the corners of truth. The meadowlarks were singing again, and the air smelled like spring, wet earth and growing things and diesel exhaust fading into dusk. Travis put his hand on my shoulder. Clem would be proud. He waited 40 years for this. Worth it? I looked at the holes we dug, at the mud on my boots, at Emma's car still parked nearby because she'd said she wanted to stay. At my phone, where Lorraine had texted, I'm coming home, to our bedroom, tonight. Yeah, I said. It was worth it. Kyle Whitmore's trial lasted 3 weeks. Federal charges, Wire fraud, conspiracy, forgery, racketeering. The AG's office built a case so thorough that his lawyers advised him to take a plea deal. 15 years federal prison, restitution to the 12 farmers he'd defrauded, forfeiture of all properties purchased through the shell companies. I sat in the courtroom the day he was sentenced, April 28th. Warm spring morning, tulips blooming in the courthouse planters. Kyle stood before Judge Morrison in an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed, nothing left of the polished executive who'd passed around a laminated deed at my uncle's funeral. His lawyer made a final statement about remorse and accepting responsibility. Kyle said nothing, just stood there while the judge read the sentence, 15 years without parole, and when the marshals led him away, he looked at me once. Not with anger, just hollow recognition that he'd lost everything. Lorraine squeezed my hand. She'd testified at the trial, brought her church finance documents, explained Kyle's phantom donation and the subdivision plan he'd hidden behind charity. The congregation had been shocked. The minister had apologized from the pulpit. Outside on the courthouse steps, the farmers gathered. Henderson shook my hand, said the AG had voided all of Kyle's fraudulent contracts. They'd get their land back, clear title, no liens. Kowalski brought his wife, who hugged me and cried and said she was sorry for the things she'd said at the grocery store. Travis stood with Emma, both of them smiling. My son had been hired by the Farmers Co-op as general manager, better pay than Kyle had ever given him. Emma's principal had resigned after the school board discovered he'd taken bribes to pressure teachers. She had her job back and the respect of parents who'd learned the truth. "What are you going to do with the land?" Henderson asked. "Some of it I'll keep, the farmhouse, couple acres around it. The rest," I looked at Travis. "I'm thinking a community trust. Lease it to you and the others. Fair rates, long-term security. Keep it farming land like it's supposed to be." "And the mineral rights?" Paulson asked. $80 million worth of natural gas? Leased to a company out of Omaha. They'll pay royalties over the next 20 years. I'd spent 2 weeks with lawyers figuring out the details. $1 million goes to the church, the real youth camp, Clem's name on it. Another $1 million for scholarships, local kids who want to study surveying, engineering, trades. The rest goes into trust for the community, infrastructure, emergency relief, things that actually help people. "You're giving it away?" Miller said. Clem lived poor so I could stand rich. But he didn't mean rich in money. He meant rich in knowing the truth matters. That patience wins. That precision and honesty still count for something. I looked at the courthouse behind us, at the carved words above the entrance. Equal justice, under law. I'm keeping enough to live comfortable. The rest belongs to the community Clem never stopped believing in, even when that community thought he was crazy. The reporters asked for interviews. I gave them one, brief, said everything I needed to say. Truth takes time. Spring always comes. The ground gives up its secrets when it's ready. Lorraine and I drove home together, her hand in mine across the bench seat. The house on Maple Street looked the same as always. Yellow kitchen, front porch, the life we'd built over 40 years. But it felt different, earned, maybe, tested, and proven. Emma came for dinner that night. Travis, too, with his girlfriend from the co-op. We sat around the table while Lorraine served pot roast and fresh bread, and the yellow kitchen caught the evening light just like it had for 2 decades. "To Clem," Travis said, raising his glass. "To patience," Emma added. "To truth," I said. We clinked glasses. Water for Emma, who was driving, beer for Travis, wine for Lorraine and me. Simple meal, simple moment, but there's a richness in simple things when you've nearly lost them. After everyone left, Lorraine and I sat on the porch. May evening, warm enough to hear crickets, smell the lilacs from the neighbor's yard. She leaned against me, and I put my arm around her. "Was it worth it?" she asked. "Losing those months, nearly losing us. I never lost you. You were investigating the whole time. I almost gave up on you, though. Almost decided you were wrong. But you didn't. No." She was quiet for a moment. "What made you so sure? Even when everyone thought you were crazy?" Clem's notebooks, the precision in them. A man who measures things that carefully, who documents everything, who marks the truth 6 feet deep because he knows it'll be challenged. That's not crazy, that's faith. Faith that someone will eventually care enough to dig. The crickets sang, the lilacs perfumed the air. Somewhere to the northwest, on land that now belonged to a community trust, iron spikes marked the corners of truth. And somewhere deeper still, natural gas deposits waited, worth enough to change lives, build futures, honor a hermit who'd lived sabmal so others could stand tall. I saw Emma talking to the museum curator, Lorraine said, about Clem's transit. She wants to donate it, put it in the county museum with a plaque about surveying history. What'll it say? I thought about Clem's midnight surveys, his careful measurements, his 40-year vigil, thought about frozen ground that finally thawed, about truth that waited patient as seasons, about iron that didn't lie. Precision tells the truth, I said, and patience lets it rise. The county museum sits on Main Street, limestone building from 1908. They gave Clem's transit its own display case, walnut and glass, right by the entrance where everyone has to pass it. The plaque reads, "Property of Clement Brennan, 1931 to 2025, Union Pacific Railroad Surveyor." He marked the truth so deep they couldn't erase it. I visit sometimes, usually on Tuesday mornings when the museum's quiet. Stand there looking at that rusted instrument, brass telescope still focused on something I can't see, leveling screws still frozen in position from the last time Clem used it. The curator told me school groups come through now. Emma brings her 5th graders every spring, teaches them about surveying, about how you measure truth. The kids press their faces to the glass, ask questions about the old man who lived alone and died with secrets nobody believed. Emma tells them the real story, not about money or revenge or justice, exactly, about patience, about how some truths are buried so deep you have to wait for the right season to dig, about how spring always comes, even after the longest winter, if you're willing to trust the ground will thaw. Last week they planted trees at Clem's farmhouse site, 12 saplings, one for each farmer who got their land back. Travis organized it. Whole community showed up. The farmhouse itself is gone. We tore it down and scattered the boards, but we kept the foundation, built a pavilion there, picnic tables, a memorial marker. Kids play there now, climb the trees as they grow, run across ground that used to be frozen, where iron spikes waited beneath frost and doubt and 40 years of calling a truth teller crazy. Lorraine and I walk that land sometimes, holding hands, counting meadowlarks. The youth camp opened last month. Clem Brennan Memorial Camp for Kids. Kyle's phantom promise made real. Children's voices carry across the prairie, and I think about how Clem would have liked that sound. He lived alone, but he never stopped believing in community, never stopped marking truth for the people who'd come after. I'm 68 years old, got maybe 20 good years left if I'm lucky. I spend them working the community trust, making sure the land stays in the hands of people who will care for it, making sure the scholarships reach kids who need them, making sure Clem's vigil meant something beyond just money. The transit sits in its glass case, rusted and silent, telling one story to tourists and another to anyone who knows how to read precision. It says, "A crooked board won't hold weight." It says, "Truth runs on its own schedule." It says, "The ground always gives up its secrets to those patient enough to wait for spring." Some folks still ask if $80 million was worth tearing up a family, nearly losing a wife, watching a son sacrifice his savings and a daughter face job loss. I tell them I wasn't fighting for money. I was fighting so my uncle didn't die crazy and alone with the truth nobody believed. The money? Most of it's in trust now, working for the community, building futures. What I kept was enough to live comfortable, help my kids, maybe take Lorraine on that trip to the coast she's been talking about. But what really matters is the transit in the museum, the trees growing at the farmhouse site, the kids learning that patience and precision still count for something in a world that mostly values speed and shortcuts. Truth's patient. Spring always comes. The ground will thaw when it's ready.